Welcome into Rounding the Bases.
Round the bases. Everybody knows Joe Goldberg. It's around the bases. Everybody knows Joe Goldberg.
Hey, everybody, welcome back to another episode of Rounding the Bases, presented by Community America Credit Union, invested in you. Fun conversation coming up here in just a moment. I cannot believe that we are past Memorial Day. If you're listening to this when it comes out or sometime around then in 2025, we're heading into the summer months and certainly knee deep in the middle of baseball right now. And it's fun when I get back home from road trips and get a chance to visit with some guests. And sometimes that's the only networking I get to do just because I'm so busy during the baseball season. The good news is, at least for me, is that my guest today is someone that I've had the chance to network with over coffee a couple of times. He's a great networker. And so it'll be fun to be able to have maybe one of our types of conversations that we might have over coffee right here for everyone to listen to. Today's guest is an executive super connector who has spent more than 40 years adding value in more ways than quarterly earnings. His name is Jeff Pelaccio, an accomplished speaker, podcast creator, and mastermind behind Pelaccio Partners. It's the firm that companies of every size turn to when building culture. It's as important as building revenue. And by laying a foundation of real-life strategies, driving extraordinary outcomes for all that he meets, because the more people you know, the more people you can help, no matter where your career may take you. And it feels to me like every time I'm talking to Jeff, he knows somebody else. He's meeting somebody else. And really, I think one of the better networkers that I've met. Jeff, welcome into Rounding the Bases, or what I like to say when I have podcast guests, kind of a sports term, we're completing the home and home. I've been on your podcast. You're now coming on mine. Welcome in.
Love it. I'm very honored. You're like the podfather of Kansas City podcasters. I mean, I think 2017 you started. I'm a neophyte compared to you, but I'm very honored. And you have a tremendous background. I'm going to be doing passport pictures later on today with my background. So it's all good.
It's all good. Well, I mean, I had fun on yours, but I really think like what I said there about this is, I think, just going to be like a conversation that you and I have when we grab coffee. And of course, that becomes easier for me, you know, in the fall and the winter than in season. I still do them, but it's so hard. But it's always good to just catch up with you, see what's going on in the world. And I think that we're coming at it from similar places. We both love sports as well and very interested in culture and business. Let's first just talk about what you're doing in the real world, so to speak, and then we'll get back to how you got here. But tell me a little bit about your business.
Yeah, as you know, I had a long corporate career, every t-shirt size company from 16 employees to over 1 million employees, largest company in the world. When I got out of college, I worked for AT&T. And everything in between, logo companies like Capital One, Sprint, Bayer, Boehringer Ingelheim, and then companies never heard of. So since COVID, I've been on this kind of professional journey to figure out what's next for me. Because I think you talk about being in the back nine of a career. I definitely think I'm on the back nine, but I'm only going to say I'm on the 10th hole. So it's not like the 17th hole because I got plenty more in the tank. So yeah, after doing a lot of different things, I launched my podcast in January of 2023. It's a weekly podcast. I just published episode 151. And that has got me into helping other companies create and host their podcasts, whether it's to attract, great clients, or what I really find, because I had a long career building great cultures at a lot of different companies, especially startups. I think podcasting is a great way to build culture, internally, and getting messages out and humanizing leadership. And I think it's an outstanding platform for especially B2B sales forces that are in cars, getting them, sales leadership messages across.
There's so much I want to hit on there. It wasn't necessarily top of my list, but my mind is going to the importance of a podcast, because I think that people, and this isn't meant to be like, hey, anybody that's listening, go start a podcast. However, if you want to, I think Jeff's a great example of it. more than me, because a lot of people think, well, you're in TV, why wouldn't you have a podcast? And first off, it was a scary thing for me even when I started, because it was out of my comfort zone. It's more in my comfort zone probably than yours, because I interview people for a living, and this is what I do every day. It was uncomfortable because it's like, well, how do you set it up? How does it work? How do you get it to people? Like all the questions that you don't really think about as a listener, suddenly you're thinking, wait a minute, I have to put this thing together, and how do you edit it, and how do you push it out there? All these things, right? What something as simple as cover art. You need cover art to put in there. And how does it get on iTunes? Or I don't even think iTunes is a thing anymore, right? I mean, all these things that I think can scare people in starting something new. Same thing with when people write a book. Well, I'd love to write a book, but where do I start? But to me, this podcast was never about, hey, I want to be a podcaster. It was strategic. It was meant to be a connection piece. It was meant to be a lead generation. It was meant to be a content creator and all these things, much more than revenue or anything like that. And I'm curious. So that might surprise people about me, but I didn't do this podcast because I wanted another avenue to broadcast in. It was meant to support my business. But I think that there are a lot of people out there like you that don't have my job, that are delving into this podcast world and benefiting from it. And so, two-part question. One, how hard was it for you to start this? Was it uncomfortable? Was it not? And what has it done for you?
Yeah, so great question. So I'm a big Tim Ferriss fan. So I read his book 4 Hour Work Week, and then 4 Hour Body, and I started my bromance with him. And he launched his podcast in 2014, and I just I loved it, and I was, commuting every day, and that would be my podcast time. And he had great guests. He's an investor, well known. So he's had, he's had Peter Maluk on, who's appeared in your book and your podcast. He's had, Tony Robbins, Jamie Foxx, Reid Hoffman, the founder of LinkedIn, Reed Hastings, the founder of Netflix. And I just love the medium, and he's long form guy, 2.5 hours. So I thought about having one and just doing it, but just wasn't. I was like, it's just not the right time. Shit was happening at work. I think we can swear here, but
sure, anyhow. You can. You just click the button and then it's legal.
Exactly.
I can't do that on TV, by the way. That gets me in trouble.
Yeah, right. FCC coming down hard on Joel. Right. So I just kept putting it off. I went through Seth Godin's podcasting workshop. So I got, that was like late 2018 into 19. It was like a 5-month cohort program, but it just didn't feel like the right time. And then I finally did it. I kept putting it off, and then I finally got it together, and it helped me to answer your question, how hard it was. I could have done the audio editing and all that. It just wasn't my, passion. But my producer, my business partner, Joe Deshawn, we worked at, 4 different W-2 companies together, 3 divisions of Sprint, and then Boehringer Ingelheim. And I knew he was a great audio video editor because we used to do videos for the Salesforce when we were at Boehringer. And I got him to do that. And then my cover art was done by a close friend. We've known each other since elementary school. Played stickball together and wiffle ball. We taught, you and I talked about that when you appeared on the podcast. And he did my cover art, so it looks professional. And Joe was great to add music, so that's how I did it. And I think the second part of your question was, what does that led me to? Well, one, I think you get something about just doing the podcast, and I think yours is a weekly podcast also, and I know you have a ton more episodes than I do. But it's something about putting it out there in the world. And you meet unbelievable people that you would never know before. And what has led me to a business to help other companies in terms of doing their podcasts and helping them, be best in class.
I think it's, I don't think it's a phase. There was a stretch back in the, I'd say 2005, 6, 7-ish range where blogging became big. Not that it's not still out there, but it was like everybody had to have a blog. And eventually that morphed into newsletters and Substacks and all these other things. And I felt like when podcasting started, and of course, blogging didn't start in 2005. Podcasting didn't start when I began this, or even when Tim Ferriss began it. It was there are people that were podcasting well before anybody knew what podcasts were.
Right.
But now it's become such a thing, even for the celebrities, right? I mean, you look at the Kelsey brothers, or you look at a lot of famous actors that are doing podcasts.
Yeah, I love the Smart List podcast with Jason Bateman, Sean Hayes, and Will Arnett. It's
great.
So funny.
And they bring you in places that not every, but so that, like, there's something for everyone. I don't think this is going away. I think it's a medium that is as big as, radio was at one point, or whatever, on and on. But it'll continue to evolve in different ways for people. And I think it's so great that you could put this out there and that you're constantly using it to meet new people and with very warm conversations as well. But I'm curious, getting to not just the podcasting, but your business. You were at a workshop that I did recently that I hosted along with two former podcast guests on this show, Jeff Udick and Dan James, who came in from Seattle, and we hosted the Trust Progression Workshop. And Jeff is a great expert, among many things, on generations in the workplace. And he was talking about the difference between Gen Z and millennials and Gen X and boomers in the workplace. And I don't know, I know you got me by a few years, so I don't know if you fall under Gen X or
I'm on the late edge of the baby boomers. So
all right, I'll call you a very old Gen X. How about that?
There you go.
Or if you want to be a really young boomer, that's fine.
Either way, it's all good.
I view you as similar to me in age, but the reason why I bring it up, not to compare our ages, is that I think he was saying something in his keynote that day about how, like, Gen Xers and I guess some baby boomers, that the midlife crisis for a lot of us is quitting corporate jobs and starting their own thing. And I don't know that was the case for you. I'm not suggesting this was a midlife crisis, but I am suggesting that there was a time when you were coming up and you were working and doing all this work with the major companies that you mentioned, that you would do that for your life, and that was it. Like, there were no questions asked, and that was it. And you got a good pension, a 401k, all these type of things, and you punched the clock and you did it every single day. And now suddenly it feels like a lot of people are going into the space you're going into. So I'm curious what it took to get there, because that is less safe, right? I mean, there's so much more room to have freedom to do what you want. But when you've never known that was a possibility, because we weren't raised that way, our generation, like Gen Z, they're going to go try new things every day. Millennials are going to explore. We weren't allowed to do that. That's just not the way it was, right? It's the same thing. Like, if you wanted a college education, this is what you did. And now it's like, well, maybe I don't have to do that. So tell me about that a little bit. What was that leap like for you, and how uncomfortable was it at first?
Yeah, and so it's interesting. I think the late stage baby boomers, like myself, we were the first generation, or the only time where you didn't have a job for life. So I think older baby boomers, they were going to work at IBM or XYZ company 30 years, get the pension, get the gold watch, and I worked for AT&T, largest company in the world at the time, 1 million employees. And so that was a old school company, like an IBM back in the day, just making, when they had 1 million employees before they broke up the local divisions, they controlled like X percent of the gross domestic product of the US. They were that large. And then I went to Sprint. They were 18 months old, a startup, and it was crazy. It was so different. And then I'm thinking, okay, I was at AT&T for 5.5 years. I go to Sprint. I'm at the corporate headquarters in Kansas City. I have a job for, if I want to do this, I'm going to have a job for life. Well, about 7 years in, they make this crazy decision to move business marketing to Dallas, 40 people. And I'm like, that was the first time I said, this is crazy, corporate America. Like, it's stupid. It made no sense to move down there. And so, fast forward to when I went into my own business, I really thought my gift professionally was to build great cultures, where people can do their best work, have fun, and do great things together, and develop personally and professionally. I really thought that was it, but I got caught up in 2019 Aratana Therapeutics. I had about a 5.5-year run there. We go from $0 in revenue to 25 million. We get bought by Elanco, $4 billion company based in Indianapolis. They probably had 6 of me in Indianapolis, so I knew I didn't have a job. And this was, at that time, my 8th involuntary transition. So I went to United Way to work for a friend of mine, Mike Goff, and I really thought it was going to be a bridge job. I interviewed, but not really. And it wasn't a lay down. Mike said, hey, I'm getting a lot of good candidates. And I said, Mike, look, we're friends. You hire me, we're still friends. You don't hire me, we're still friends. You got to do what's right for you. And then I started there December of 2019, March of 2020, COVID, we work at home. And then there was a layoff of about 25% of the full-time employees in August. So I really went back and tried to get a corporate job. And it just wasn't feeling right. And I was talking about this, I think I was facing ageism, racism, and genderism. And I don't say that like, oh, woe was me. I'm the white guy that caused all the problems in the world and the corporate world and the world in general. But God or the universe, whatever you believe in, puts you where you need to be. So I finally said, look, I got to do something on my own where I control my own destiny. And, would I ever go back to corporate America? If it was a perfect opportunity, I would. But I figured I need to do something, and I explored a lot of different things. I taught at KU in their business school, a sales leadership class. I worked for a leadership development company doing business development. I just explored various different things. And I got into doing what I love to do is this podcasting. And a great book about this it came out, I believe, late last year. Never Play It Safe by Chase Jarvis, but he talks about humans are meant to it's not the same as it was before. Like we went to high school, get good grades, go to college, get good grades, after college get a job, and do well, then you're going to get married, and then you're buy a house, and then you have kids. So the structure was kind of laid out for you. Like me and my brother were the first in our generation, the first in our family to go to college, right? My parents immigrated over from Italy. It was different. I think you grew up in a similar environment. I grew up in Peekskill, New York. We were half black and a lot of blue collar, first generation kids, Italians, Polish, Irish, my father was a union welder, and this, it's just different, and, sports were different in terms of, we were tough. I remember reading Phil Pepe, longtime Daily News writer, covered the Yankees for years, wrote this book, Winners Never Quit. It's about toughness. Mickey Mantle just sucking it up and, after injuries and going back on the field. And that was what we did, but that wasn't the right, it wasn't the right thing. Like I hurt my knee several times growing up, and I probably should have had surgery, when I was in 8th grade. And my first surgery was my senior year in high school.
It's quite the journey. And, I think that you were closer to as the son of immigrants, I was really the grandson of immigrants. So I was a little bit further removed, so that by the time that I came around, it felt like I was supposed to be where I was at, if that makes sense. I wasn't new to the community. My family, my parents weren't new. Both of my grandmothers were immigrants. My grandfathers were not, but their parents were. So either my grandmothers or my great grandfathers were immigrants. Of course, I heard all of the stories. And, I think now, my grandfather, who retired by the time I could remember, but he owned dry cleaning plants and facilities in New Jersey. And that was much closer to the immigrant world that he grew up in. So you grew up more in it than me. But But I think it's an interesting perspective. You just talked about kind of understanding the way the world has gone. A lot of people do have a woe is me. And, it sounds like grew up in a melting pot of a community where, we see the world changing right now, but it's a lot of what you grew up with. And so I'm curious sort of how you balance all of that. And I want to talk to you about ageism, what the future is going to look like, the dehumanization of the hiring process. The world is different today than what it was in the past. It will continue to change. And I'm curious sort of how you navigate that, especially in a position now where you're calling your own shots.
Yeah, and I think, so part of it, both my wife and I have had crazy professional journeys during COVID. Like she's on her ninth job. So I've seen her interview and things like that. But literally in 2014, I was in a job transition. I had just exited Boehringer Ingelheim. They made a major decision to get closer to the customer. And this is a memo that went out to about 400, 500 people by the COO. It said, to get closer to the customer, we decided to eliminate two positions. One was mine and one was the head of the equine business unit. I don't know how that got them closer to the customer by eliminating those two positions, but I think it's that corporate speak that's really funny, so think The Office episode. But, my wife went through and I've seen this happen since 2014. Companies ghost people that interview. I'm not talking about a phone, just a phone interview, but it's dehumanizing how companies treat prospects, job candidates. People have, let's say you get down to 6 finalists. Those people have spent 30, 40 hours preparing or being in interviews. And a lot of the times they do not get contacted by anyone. And it's so bad. And my wife has gone through it. She literally went through a process where the company contacted her. She said during the interview process, I've been ghosted. And the hiring manager goes, I will not ghost you. Well, got ghosted. And the same thing happened to me in, let's say, 2019. Company reached out to me on LinkedIn. I had a relationship with a business relationship, that is, with the president of the company. And her chief strategy officer reached out to me on LinkedIn. We had breakfast, went through a whole interview process. They never told me I didn't get the job. And it's what I tell people that want advice in terms of hiring is, look, you could be a best company to work for, but if you interview 6 people as finalists and only contact one that got the job, that's the best call you can ever make. Hey, John or Joanne, you got the job. We're gonna do great things together. Here's your salary, all that. But you got to call the other 5 people. It's like a 2-minute call. Just tell them why they didn't get the job. And, I know a lot of HR people say, well, you shouldn't call them, lawsuits. I'm like, what do you mean? They put all this time in. So I think that's, that's part of it. And I'm a, late stage baby boomer. So, to talk about the ageism part, there's a lot, people don't want to retire. They don't need the big title job anymore, but they want to still add value. And I think the pendulum has kind of swung in terms of, they're facing discrimination. Like everybody I tell that I've faced, the ageism, genderism, racism, everybody goes, oh yeah, it's out there. I mean, like everybody, 100% of the sample size when I'm having coffee or talking to somebody on a podcast, they all agree. So
what do you do? I mean, like, to me, the dehumanization is not just in the hiring or not hiring someone. It's in everything right now, because we have become programmed for automation. Yeah. When we rely on automation so much, we could say this on anything, right? Like, to me, the biggest danger of AI and ChatGPT, which I love, is that it's very easy to get complacent. It's very easy to have atrophy of the brain because something's doing it for you. So the more that becomes a habit, the less we think about making that call to let somebody know, hey, here's the reason why we didn't do it. Why should I don't even know how to do that anymore. Right? I mean, that's the danger this. I mean, like, to me, there's a lane for any of us that want to still connect those dots, that want to have that personal touch. I think that's what makes people memorable, but I think it's just become so much easier to not do that because, hey, I don't have to do it anymore. It's not expected. Aren't we lowering our expectations now?
100%, and I think it's harder, with the later generations because they're so used to everything, instant, messaging, text, Slack. You can be much more bold on a text or a social media post on a comment because you don't have to. I'm looking at. I know we're virtual, but you're not facing the person. You can, you can do stuff you wouldn't do in person. Mm-hmm. And I think no matter what AI does in the future, and no one can predict it, and it's a phenomenal advantage to use AI. But where leadership is going, and this doesn't change, is it's in the relationships. It's knowing the person, and meeting them where they're at, right? And you can't do that in AI. It can't happen. And the people today, they don't even know about this. Like it's gotten worse in terms of the hiring process. I mean, there's more ghosting, and companies well, employees have ghosted me, or not employees, job candidates. So I'm like, okay, well, that doesn't mean it's right. That's a choice they made. You probably don't want that person working for you anyhow, but you got to do the right thing.
Yeah. But then the other piece to it too, and by the way, like, doesn't really matter what generation you are. And if you're listening to this and you're, say, a millennial, at some point you're going to be on the back nine, so to speak. And I agree with you. I'm on the 10th hole, maybe the 8th hole, but then again, with my golf game, I'm probably going to quit before I get to 18 anyway. So, but look, when you talk about meeting people where they're at, I think it starts with us, like, because no one's going to come. I don't know that they're going to come to us. That's not a knock, by the way, on the younger generation. It's just like we know how to do it a little bit more. We've been around longer, and so it's up to us to meet them where they're at. It's up to us to go to them. And what happens is when you invest in them and show them that you're interested, they'll come to you every single time. I mean, what are you seeing in your networking nowadays? Because there has to be some wisdom. You got 40 years, in business as a pro. What are you seeing that gives you some hope, or what are some secrets maybe that you're, still doubling down on, things that still work for you?
Yeah, and I can just make one more comment on the kind of hiring process. And I wasn't trying to say the baby boomers or the Gen Xers are not part of the problem of hiring. There's my colleagues do it, and your colleagues do it in terms of not calling people that didn't get the job. So I would say that. I think the beauty of Kansas City as a community is people care about each other. I think there's, but it's a changing, as we talk about, it's a changing way of life. And one of the things in that Never Play It Safe book by Chase Jarvis is it's attention, right? Where you put your attention. So, and what I'll say is the beauty of having coffees with people or a beer or whatever it is you're with somebody live. And the greatest gift, as you know, as an interviewer, is you give that person your full attention. So your phone is not out, and and you're fully present. I've said this for years, and my adult children are older, but I saw them grow up, and they would be with their friends, 5 friends, but they're all on their phones texting other friends that are not there. I was like, why are you doing? You're with people, like, they're right here. So
Dad, you're too old.
Right. So yeah, right. Yeah, the eye roll thing, right? So I mean, it's just a gift, and I think that people that are going to be great in the workforce or professionally or personally with their own relationships are the people that are going to focus on the people that they're with. I'm not saying don't get on Instagram or TikTok. I'm just saying when you're with somebody, you should be with somebody. But and Chase Jarvis talks about that. It's a whole chapter of his book.
Well said. And I am such a proponent of the younger generation, and they're going to do things that we've never done. They've also gone through more challenging things than we ever dealt with. Every generation's different, but they're just some little things that will stand the test of time. And I tell people all the time, you've heard me say it in speeches, that the way we go about doing things might change, but the relationships and the trust and the importance for that, that'll always be there. It's critical. And so if you could figure out how to do that at a level that others aren't doing it, and that might mean going out for those coffees that you do so well. It's such an important point. And then you get them on the corporate couch, right?
Yeah, there you go.
The podcast is a virtual couch, the podcast, so to speak. That's what you should be doing. You should actually have a couch where they lay on the couch the whole time and they get interviewed by you.
Exactly.
It just
that'll be my first live event. So.
First live event. Yeah. Come on, jump on the corporate couch. We'll rotate guests in and out.
Joel Goldberg's going to be laying on the couch today. I'm going to be interviewing him.
Tell me, what do you want to know? Okay, let's go to my baseball themed questions. We'll get to your New York Jets a little bit later on in my final.
Oh, wow. Here we go.
When you grew up out east and you got a name like Pelaccio, you're probably a Jets fan. I guess you could be a Giants fan, but I'd never pegged you as a Giants fan. Okay. Yeah. Biggest home run that you have hit professionally?
Yeah, obviously I know from listening to many of your podcasts that, you ask these questions. So, I think I love the startup. I worked at Sprint PCS when there was a startup wireless. It wasn't even part of Sprint at the time. Sprint owned 40%, then Cox, TCI, and Comcast Cable owned the other 60%. And I was employee 55 there. And we built a company very quickly, and we had $0 in revenue. It was, I think, the largest funded startup of all time, $10 billion in 1995 dollars. So I don't know what that's worth today. Our burn rate in today's dollars would have been like $2 million a day. I think it was $1 million a day with no revenue. So we built a company. I hired 25 people for my team, and we were interviewing all kinds of people. And, to go back in terms of how I got into the podcasting business, you interview people and did a lot more interviews for me, but working for startups, I've interviewed over 300 people in the course of my career, because I wasn't only interviewing for my team, I'd be interviewing for the, business marketing, consumer marketing, and market research. So, I think building that company and launching it, it was a crazy time. Sprint was fast paced, but PCS was like 3X. And I would say that was my biggest home run.
Good stuff. How about a swing and a miss, and what did you learn from it?
I really liked Brian Morris when he superimposed the 800 number and got him to an adult chat line when he did a mailing to raise money. That was a previous guest, and a pretty good one. If you want to look up Brian Morris, that was actually one of the better swings and misses we've had. I did. Yeah, that was good. Yeah, I had. So I started my career in IT, and then nothing against IT. I partnered with them my entire career after leaving that discipline. But you just work on a certain aspect of a system, or you don't get close to the customer. I wanted to get closer to the customer, being more involved in the business. So I went to consumer marketing at Sprint. And I was just learning. I'm a lifelong learner. I was just consuming books. I was a business major in college, but just because you take marketing 101 and 202 doesn't make you a marketing expert by any stretch. So I was there to build an analytical function, launch the first consumer marketing database they ever had. So we had an FCC change, and we had a mail to all the phone card customers. So just for a younger audience, phone cards were used when we didn't have mobile phones, and we could go to a pay phone or a hotel phone, dial an 800 number, and pump in about 12 digits or 14 digits, whatever we were, and we would be a lot cheaper.
It's a lot of work, though.
Yeah, it's a long time ago. So they said, we have to mail to every active customer that ever had a phone card to announce this rate change. And I was new, and I'm like, okay. So I just go into the customer database, and if they have an active status, I should mail to them? Yep, that's what we should do. I'm like, okay, I did that. So I think we had about 2 million customers at the time total, not just phone card customers and the consumer long distance. We had 2 million. I mailed 7 million pieces of mail, and so boxes and boxes of undeliverable mail was coming back. So again, another old school reference here is during the late 90s, mid to late 90s, AOL was a big internet service provider, owned the space, and they would give away free discs, mail to you. It'd be at grocery stores. So that's what Sprint did with phone cards. They mailed 7 million phone cards out, and they immediately tagged the status in the system as active. So technically what I should have done is looked at all the phone cards that were activated, and that mailing would have been a lot less. So yeah, that was a big learning, and it showed me that I had to do like reasonability checks. So if we only have 2 million total customers, the list of 7 million is probably not right.
Whew, that's a good one. That is a good big swing and a miss, but a great story nonetheless. How about small ball to you? What are the little things that add up to big results?
Yeah, I love this question of yours. Like, because one of my favorite books is James Clear, Atomic Habits, right? So he talks about if you get 1% better every day, you're 37 times better at the end of 12 months. And I read Choose Yourself by James Altucher, and he had the same concept back in the day. And it's just the little things, in terms of being kind. Understanding where an employee gets motivated, understanding them as a person, not an employee, a team member, and noticing if they've lost some weight, and mentioning that, mentioning those things that doesn't help you from where are you on this report, or where are you in this project? Like, just knowing somebody personally and caring for them, I think it goes a long way. And I would say the other thing about what I learned, is that as a leader, not that you can't, have faults or can't, look, if you only slept 3 hours the night before because your newborn's up or your dog got out of bed and you couldn't get back to sleep or whatever it was, you're not the same person as you were if you got 7 or 8 hours sleep. And showing up and feeling, people are going to watch you, right? You're the leader. And I really didn't get that in the beginning of my career. And again, it's not that you tell somebody, hey, I only got 3 hours sleep, but you still show up, because people are looking at you, and you need to, suck it up a little bit. Yeah. but still be human and vulnerable and authentic.
You don't have to be perfect. You just have to get the job done. And I always love when you hear it more from pitchers in baseball than any other position, because the starters go once every 5 days, and they're gearing up. Like, that's it. Everything they do is they're working all week long to get to it is for that one day. And then they're not at their best. And I'm always interested in the pitchers that can say, I found a way to get it done, even though I wasn't at my best. I grinded through it. I didn't have my best stuff. And some days are just going to be bad days. Right. But a lot of these guys are very productive when they're not at 100%. It's a good reminder that we're rarely at 100%. So anyway, I love that topic. It's an important piece of small ball. I can't tell you how many days that I am not at 100% going on the air, and it's a win when no one else knows it but me. And so that's, look, you're right. Life gets in the way almost every day. 4 final questions. We'll hit you with the rapid fire as we wrap things up. The first one, I was interested to hear about something that you did involving, it didn't really involve, but at least in association with the 1980 U.S. hockey team. This is a story I just love to share.
Yeah. So Yeah, the Miracle on Ice, 1980. They were the U.S. Won the gold medal, and in the semifinal beat the Russians to get there. Yeah, so my friend who went, actually the friend who did my podcast artwork, Bill Begani. There's a shout out for you, Bill, of Begani Design in Connecticut. He went direct from high school right into working for an ad agency. His father worked there, so one of their accounts was Volvo. And Volvo was a WTA sponsored, Women's Tennis Association, and he had tickets to a cocktail party where all the people were coming, and this was in the summer of '80, so February of '80, the U.S. hockey team won, and you walked in, and you had to get write your name, all that. So I said, let's have fun with this. So I wrote Micah Ruzioni, the captain of that team, even though I really didn't look like Micah Ruzioni. And at least I was Italian and had dark hair. Yeah. Bill said he was Buzz Snyder, who was blonde, and Bill was, had a mini white guy fro and dark hair. And people were coming up to it. Like, we signed autographs for of women tennis players that were coming up to us because we sit on the. Anyhow, then Tracy Austin came in. She was like the celebrity tennis player that was involved in that. But it was, in that tournament was Martina Navratilova. How do you pronounce her last name?
Yeah, Navratilova. Yeah.
But Tracy also came in, and then these guards were there, and they said that's not Michael Ruziani, and they literally chased us out. So. Yeah, I was about 20 years old. And
that's good stuff. That's what 20-year-olds do, of course. All right, second question as we round the bases. You're still claiming the Jets after all these years?
It's hard when you're growing up and it's your team. So yes, I still claim the Jets. And then I know a lot of your podcast is about leadership as well as career journeys, but the problem with the Jets is Woody Johnson is shitty, terrible owner, leader. I mean, it all starts with him. So yeah, I do like the Jets, and still, and I'll vote for. I root for the Chiefs all day long. But if Jets are coming to Arrowhead, I got either my Wayne Chrebet jersey or one of my many Namath jerseys or Darrelle Revis.
Yeah, Namath's a good place to start. All right, third question. Not Aaron Rodgers, just. Probably too sore of a subject.
No, Aaron Rodgers, Jesus. Talk about leadership or lack of.
Who is better for the organization, Aaron Rodgers or Brett Favre? Different discussion. Okay, we'll move.
Brett Favre, I would say.
I guess so. There's quite the documentary on Netflix right now involving.
I've heard, yeah.
I covered Favre in his early years. I didn't know him, but I mean, I would have interviewed him. But I was a young kid. Phenomenal quarterback to watch. Not quite so likable when you watch the piece in terms of the things he did, but that's real world stuff. Okay, third question as we round the bases. You've done so many things. What did the teaching bug? I don't know if it was the teaching bug, but what did teaching do for you? What did that do in terms of purpose and filling your cup?
Oh, in terms of when I taught at KU?
At KU, yeah. I'm imagining that did something for you. It's a little bit different, and then to be able to share that wisdom.
Yeah, I taught in my late 20s at Park University also, and just because of workload, I stopped doing it. Plus, it was a Saturday morning, 8 to 12 class for 3 semesters. And when you're late 20s and single, going Saturday mornings from 8 to 12 was a little hard for me.
Yeah,
but I love the teaching aspect. I think great leaders are teachers. And that filled my cup just from, letting, 22-year-olds, 21-year-olds, 20-year-olds and imparting some wisdom on them.
Love that. We never stop. That's part of some of the networking and what you're doing over coffees as well. Okay, beyond the corporate couch and all the networking, is there anything you have your sights set on? You said you're only on the 10th hole, so you got a lot of golf left to play, so to speak. What's an unchecked box for you?
Yeah, I think I'd like to follow in your footsteps a little bit. I can see a book or two coming out, as well as keynote speaking. One thing I miss about corporate America is I gave a ton of presentations. So, and You and I both went through Mike Bailey's unbelievably great training.
Yep, he's great.
Speaking, so I can see that.
More to come for Jeff Pelaccio, and I think we'll always be saying that. You're just not a guy that's going to stop. Slow down, maybe sometimes, maybe not. Pelaccio and Partners and the Corporate Couch, I highly recommend that you listen to his podcast. Just good, warm, insightful conversations, very laid back and easy, hopefully similar to what we've done here. You could go back and listen to any one of his guests. I wouldn't start with me because you've already heard too much of me on this podcast. But if you want to do that, that would be great too. Then Jeff could say, oh my gosh, there was a spike in numbers. Everybody wanted to listen to Goldberg. But go check out the Corporate Couch. It's a lot of fun. It's good stuff. And I love what you're doing, Jeff. And I love, beyond the podcast, I just love the way that you are a connector, the way that you meet people, the way that you show up in a world where it's hard to show up. So it's been great getting to know you. We'll continue to do that. And I appreciate you spending time on Rounding the Bases.
Yeah, well, I'm very honored to be here. Thanks so much, Joe. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Jeff.
It's around the bases. Everybody knows Joe Goldberg.